Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Yeah, I know it's a little strange. It's like what, the third or fourth location that I've filmed in the last year or so. If you guys haven't followed me on social media, which obviously the links are down below if you ever want to try to get caught up on videos, or if you ever want notifications. I do have a public page on Facebook. I have my Twitter account. So yeah, if you guys haven't heard or read, obviously I moved again. I had some stuff go on in my personal life. It's caused me to change location. I'm moving back into my old house, and actually I'll have a new location set up in there that will be more permanent. But right now, there's stuff that's still under construction. I'm not quite living there yet. Here you go. To get out these last handful of videos that I've been wanting to get out, and I've had, scripts ready, I've had my cards ready and stuff like that to talk about. I just haven't had a lot of time, and obviously I had to makeshift a location. I was trying to figure out where the best place to shoot here was. And to be honest with you, this is probably about it without being able to set up like a camera stand or something along those lines. So let us begin. So there is no skip, there's no nothing, we're just going to get right into it. And today we're going to talk about The Avengers. Now, this is a game that came out in September. I did play a good chunk of it way back when. I played it all the way up until actually probably about October. I have thoughts on it. I want to also add in the updates to it as well, to the final score. And I also want to, add in other things, other little tidbits that have come out about the game since then, because that's what I want to use this video for. I always want to use my videos, I always want to use my commentary to help either fuel a future purchase, or for you to save your money for another day. Save it for something that's even better, something that might be more worth your money and your time. Okay, and I also like to use the videos to try and highlight issues and problems that I find with the games. And obviously, I'm not an expert or anything like that. It is just my opinion, but to sit there and hopefully steer devs right, or maybe even just stir some new ideas into their head. And hopefully maybe they can come up with something even better than I'm thinking of. I'm just some lowly loudmouth jackass on YouTube, so... Oh boy. What can I say about The Avengers that hasn't been said already? The game originally came out, it was very buggy. The game design was very bland. Now, weirdly enough, story and characters were there, something that a lot of other of these types of looter shooters, or whatever devs want to fucking call them, these games in which you grind, you try to get loot, you try to build up. It's a kind of an RPG system in a way, but loot has different rarity and different things. It's anything that would be like a fucking Destiny or a Division or an Anthem. It's along those lines. Borderlands really helped popularize that type of game style, where it blended those RPG elements and with this looter shooter element in which you're grinding for really cool, really badass gear that's supposed to do badass things. Now, some games have gotten that right over time. Obviously Borderlands has always nailed this with unique gun design and just different abilities and things that every time you get something new, it feels fresh, it feels unique. Destiny has started to really get a hold of this too. Over the last year or so, they've really been hitting on all cylinders when it comes to design. Now, obviously there's complaints with its newest expansion, but I'm not here to talk about that. I just want to talk about the things that they have been doing right, and that's definitely one of them. They've had some very unique weaponry, and they've really started to open up a little bit more when it comes to like different, play styles, and that's super important in a game type like this. Anthem failed on this. Aside from the bugs and the issues, and the lack of good characters and story, that was the biggest issue with Anthem. And to be honest with you, looking back at my old Anthem review, I was a little bit fucking nice to Anthem, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think I scored it a 5 out of 10, which is straight average, and really was more like a 3 out of 10. But I enjoyed the actual gameplay and combat so much that I actually excused the fact that it was really shit. And so with The Avengers, I want to be really... not so much harsh on it, but I definitely want to be very much honest and open with it. The Avengers gets two things right, which I mentioned, just here a second ago. Characters and the story. Now, the characters, especially the one that you mainly play as, Kamala Khan, aka Ms. Marvel, which, don't get that confused with Captain Marvel. I keep freaking doing this, and it pisses everybody off around me. And she is such a great character, as so many other people have pointed out, that she is somebody that is supposed to be your eyes in this world. It's as if you were being introduced and being elevated into this world, right? And she has this great blend of like starry-eyed, oh, I get to see all the people that I've looked up to, as well as, hey, I need to step up and be a hero. And, and obviously there's some conflicts in between that, leading up to that moment, but she's the catalyst to help bring the Avengers back after a cataclysmic event. I really liked Kamala Khan. I liked all the characters for the most part. I felt like they were either true to their comic book counterparts, or I felt like they didn't do anything, they did things, they didn't do anything that I felt was out of character for them, if that makes any sense, whether it was something that was expressed through the movies or the comics. So I feel like they did a really good job nailing them. I'd say most of the voices were pretty on par. A couple of voices were a little off because they were trying to emulate too much of like the movie characters, which I get is like the most relevant and the newest things to try and kind of you relate to in a way. Kind of like, honestly, let's be real here, no matter how you think of it, Jared Leto's Joker really tried to emulate more of Heath Ledger's Joker, but just really failed miserably on it. But you can see where he was trying to be more like him rather than just trying to focus on being his own character. But nothing really took you out of the game. Most of the voice actors did a really good job, and that would actually probably be a third thing that I feel like the game really did get right. The voice acting was really good throughout, for the most part. There was nothing that made me cringe or something that made me go, oh, that was a bad line. There's nothing like that whatsoever here. I feel like they did a pretty solid job. And then, of course, there's the story. Now, obviously, tying those other two elements in with it, as well as giving you an interesting story of, like, who kind of done it thing, where they're trying to figure out who the bad guy is, what the bad guy's motivations are, so on and so forth. Seeing little pieces and glimpses and trying to piece the puzzle together was actually pretty fun and interesting, and was a great throwback to, old school, Avengers stuff, when it comes to the comics and whatnot. And I really liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. And seeing, of course, obviously the 6 main Avengers was really fun. And was so great and so inspiring. So obviously with all these elements, I feel like the game absolutely killed it, right? And these elements alone, I'd give the game a 9 out of 10, honestly. Because there are some elements where they could have improved a little bit on those things. But overall, those things were the most solid parts of it, right? So then we get into the parts where they were kind of more in between. They were not so much good, but they weren't bad either. And honestly, I'd say that's the combat. The combat in this game is kind of bland. So the combat in this game isn't as basic as the original beta had kind of made everybody feel like it was, right? The beta really hid a lot of the secret abilities and the certain things, abilities and shit like that were eventually going to be in the final game. So a lot of people were like, is this it? And it was bad, right? It was already giving me really bad vibes. But turns out the combat had a bit more depth into it, but it's not enough to make me go, oh wow, this is something fresh, or oh wow, this is something new, right? Because where Borderlands has always succeeded is the fact that Borderlands has always done a great job of giving you different playstyles, different ways to, use a particular character. They give you 3 different trees, right? And with each different tree, it does play very differently, Each, for instance, going back to Borderlands 2, right? So the Commando, he goes ahead and he has, his 3 skill trees. One skill tree might make it to where he has 1 supercharged turret, right? And it'll sit there and have more missile launchers, or maybe it'll have extra guns on it, whatever, right? And can make it where it has, more health, it can do more damage, yada, 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 right? That's the skill tree. It's got all these things that can focus on it, right? Well, on another skill tree, it might make it to where instead of having 1 massive badass turret, you might have 2 turrets that you can, stick to different surfaces and stuff like that. And make it to where you can, have it to where, like, there's basically like a hallway, and, you stick your turrets up and you have people funnel into it and just blow them all away, right? And it's these different unique playstyles that make it to where, like, you want to maybe respect, because you're like, hey, that was really fun, but I got this really cool, relic that lets it, that focuses more on, like, the stuff from this skill tree. So maybe I'll respec and put my points in here and see if I can get something cool here, a cool build here, right? There's these unique builds and blends and stuff that, also tie in with, it's not even tying in with the guns, right? So there's all this just unique stuff that you can do with Borderlands and have fun, testing out new abilities and testing out new guns and testing out new relics, so on and so forth. Just all of these different variations. Avengers doesn't really have that. Yes, they have, they got all this different gear with all these different gear sets and stuff like that, but there's nothing that really opens it up and helps it be unique, right? And that's something that I feel like games like this are failing. Diablo 3, it's another game I haven't even touched on. Diablo 3 is another game that has done this really, really well, where they take it to where you get a unique piece of gear and they can change your entire playstyle because it might, emphasize a particular ability, or it might go ahead and make it where this particular ability is supercharged or does something entirely different. This is something that these looter shooters need more of. These things that help you get this unique, mechanic or this unique ability or this thing that's going to help people kind of change their playstyle or make them think twice and be like, maybe I should do this, or hey, maybe I should, double down and focus on this, whatever, to give these different builds and stuff. And it's like they were like on the cusp, but then they kind of backed off it. I wish that they hadn't, because really there's like 6 to 7 characters. I mean, there's 7 now with Kate Bishop, but it feels like even though there's 7 characters, there's really only 3, because there's like 2 or 3 characters with each, little pillar that does something similar. Okay, this person has, distance attacks, or this person has, close melee attacks, or this person has, so on and so forth, right? So it makes it to where like 2 or 3 characters will play very similar to each other and they don't feel unique. And now, granted, don't get me wrong, I get it. There's always going to be some similarities between, characters, and that's perfectly fine. But, like, I don't know, it just feels like even when it comes to some of, like, the move sets, other than the actual ultimate abilities, feel very samey. Even though, they're supposed to look different, they're being executed by different characters, they feel the same, besides somebody like Thor, for instance. Thor's really cool thing that I actually love using him for is, with his hammer, you can actually throw his hammer, hit an enemy with it, and because it acts like the Mjolnir from, the comics or from the movies, characters, if they don't get defeated, they're stuck under there. They'll be flailing around trying to get out from underneath this thing, trying to pull it off, and they can't until you either call it back, or you go and pick it up, or until you go beat their ass, which is awesome. It's cool stuff like that that makes me not only feel like an adventure, but actually gets me up and whooping and hollering, because I like that unique stuff. I'm fighting 2 different enemies, I'm going to pin this one, and I'm going to focus on this one. And I think that's awesome. I like that. Or if I'm focusing on this one, he starts coming out, I can pull Mjolnir, dude's going to, kind of ricochet a little bit because of the force of me pulling it, right? Because it's the equivalent of, trying to move an immovable object until it moves itself, right? It'll sit there and stun that person for a second while I go back to beating this guy, and then I'll go handle this guy. Right? It's just so much more fun playing as Thor than it is a couple of other characters, which kind of sucks, because it should be an extreme amount of fun playing all the characters, not just like half of them, or, you know what I'm saying, or 2/3 of them. I feel like this is where they just kind of missed the point, but that's also where I feel like the game got rushed a little bit, right? It's definitely, for sure, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as the review goes on, but you can tell that Avengers was definitely a little bit raw in the middle, right? It seemed like they had a lot of great ideas. The main story was done, point A to point, B was done, but it's all the stuff that happens leading up to those 2 points, that in the middle wasn't done. And it gave us this raw, eggy cake instead of what we should have had. And it does. It sucks, because I wish we could have got another 6 months or a year, because really, I think the game would have been done by the time that it released had COVID not happened. Working remotely and working from home, while is nice, obviously really hurt getting the game, not just this game, but a lot of games done. I really do think that really hurt a lot of what happened with Cyberpunk. That's why it got delayed, and then they released it, but really, it should have gotten delayed again. I know fans would have been happy, but really, if it would have came out in March, I think we would have been in a lot better spot overall. And, I'll talk about that when that review comes up, but COVID really hurt a lot of games this year. Now, there are some games that were able to come out either right after everything was done, or they were already in the polishing stages, wrapping up the polishing stages, so they weren't nearly as buggy. They weren't nearly as hurt by COVID as these games coming out later in the year have been. and it shows. It really does. This game was definitely shipped a little too early. I wish they would have pushed it back, and that's where we start to kind of get into the bad. Avengers, apparently, according to Square Enix themselves, has missed the budget by $60+ billion. Yikes. And, it didn't help that a lot of people were shitting on the game, at beta. The beta was bad. I can't emphasize this enough. And I hope that there's some dev listening to me. Like I said, I know I'm a loudmouth YouTuber, I get it. And I know that the industry is not nearly as favorable about this as it should be. But please, for the love of God, hear me and make sure this message gets out to anybody else who wants to make similar games to this, right? The biggest issue is that instead of having a beta and then having a nice lengthy beta at that, and letting gamers just beat the shit out of your game, taking back all of the feedback, taking back everything that they say, writing it all down and seeing what you can whip up and giving it to where, like, hey, you know what, we had the beta, now we'll release it 6 months from now or a year from now, and utilizing all of that feedback, and then maybe having one more beta before that, like 3 months, not a month anymore, because the month thing isn't working. 3 months ahead, so that way it gives you time to actually do something. Have another one 3 months before you're supposed to launch, or where you're trying to plan to launch, and then see, right? And then that way, you can actually get a game closer to what the fans want. Now, obviously, I get it, it's your vision, and I understand that. But I also understand, though, too, as somebody who likes to create and likes to sit there and do things, sometimes you need to get out of your own fucking mind and have people kind of give you feedback to be able to help focus up your ideas. And even if you don't completely listen to all of the fans, which, I don't get me wrong, you shouldn't, because they're not devs, they don't know how it all works. At least taking some of their ideas and either making them happen or refining them to make it where it'll actually work, that's the point, right? These whole betas a month before the game releases, A, they're not working, they're only hurting your games because people are seeing what kind of a fucking mess they are. But B, it's also making it to where, like I said, you're not having enough time to actually make significant change when people are like, hey, this is fucking shit, what are you doing? So for the love of fucking Jesus Christ Almighty, will you please stop having betas a month out and then not really taking any of the feedback until months after. You might as well have a beta months and months and months in advance. Even if it's nothing anywhere close to what the finished product be, that's fine. Because, like I said, you're going to have fans who are going to help generate ideas for you and go, oh shit, yeah, that would make it more unique. Or hey, maybe that is closer to the vision that I want. Or hey, that's not even something I thought about. Right? And that's the whole point. That's what the point should be. So, and I'll bang on this drum until somebody listens to me and we actually see if that will work. Because what's going on now, it ain't working. The biggest issue really was the bugs, right? And that goes back to, like I said, it was obviously definitely not done. So it missed its budget. It's super buggy. People have been bashing on it since it came out. There was one patch that fixed over 1,000 bugs. I mean, 1,000 bugs. I don't think I've ever heard of a patch fix that many. Now, I'm not saying that hasn't happened. I'm not saying that's not a thing. But it's just something that's so rare, something so unique that I'm blown away by it. And the game has gotten better overall, performance-wise. It has gotten a lot better in fixing up, some of these bugs and these issues that they've had. It's been a few months now since, obviously, it's been released. And they just added their latest content drop with Kate Bishop and obviously tying it into eventually Hawkeye. I feel like that was good, and that was something that was very needed, and I'm excited to actually, it actually made me excited to go see what's coming out down the line. Like I said, the bad beta, obviously being released far too early, definitely hurt this game. But another thing that really hurt this game was its horrible game design. Now, I'm not talking about the whole game itself, but like level design, I guess you could say. I'm not sure exactly what to peg it on. It's something in between the two, if not both, where so I guess let me explain. So, while the characters in the combat are at least good enough, serviceable enough, the lack of innovative design when it comes to these when it comes to these levels, when it comes to certain objectives, or And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, remember original Destiny, vanilla Destiny, when it was always just deploy Ghost, let him scan something, defend him, right? It was like that, like, almost every fucking mission. Avengers apparently was playing a lot of vanilla Destiny, you know, before they decided to do this game, because a lot of the mission design is around that very thing. Let me scan something, let me wait for it to download, and while it's doing that, here's a bunch of enemies. Now, the enemy, you know, design, the enemy variety is fresh enough. And don't be wrong, boss battles are actually fairly interesting. Although they're not quite up to snuff, right? They're not unique, right? Most of them, it's just you just hit them, you just punch them, you just fire your lasers. If you're Iron Man, you just throw the hammer. Like there's no new unique mechanics with it, right? And that's a little bit of a bummer too. So that's why I'm kind of talking about it now in the bad. But while the enemy design is fresh enough to where you have to utilize all the different members, and their unique abilities and stuff like that. Honestly, it's boring. I found myself falling asleep playing the game because it's not fresh, it's not innovative, it's not. The only thing really that keeps you really going is the dialogue and the story and the characters interacting with one another and, talking about backstory and talking about things that have happened, and things that are going on, rivalries, all that other stuff. They'll have conversations with one another, and that's really freaking cool. Other than that, the rest of the game is borefest, and it sucks. Because the last thing you want is your loot to suck, which it mainly does. And while it looks unique, it doesn't make you look fully unique, right? You've got costumes that can make you look unique, and those are all free, and that's great. But holy crap, you've got all this gear that you can do that will give you like perks and stuff like that, but it doesn't change how you look. It doesn't really do much when it comes to like changing your builds or how you attack different things or objectives. It's just bland. It's just boring, until you get to the higher level stuff, which, don't get me wrong, I guess the higher level stuff should be more unique, but, I mean, I'm talking like top tier stuff. Like, once you're like level 45, 50 type stuff, and there's at least 50 levels, right? Now, the Kate Bishop stuff is a little bit more interesting, and it definitely injects a little bit more freshness into it, so obviously they're already starting to take that to heart. Keep doing that, I guess that's my point here, because the base game, like I said, that was my biggest gripe is just, even though the combat can be fun and sometimes can get you out of your seat when you go ahead and land a fucking cool combo with, Thor and Captain America, or Iron Man and Captain America, using the shield and then fucking shooting a beam across. You can do those types of cool little combos like you've seen in the movies or you've seen in the comics. And that stuff is the best part of this game. But everything else is super boring, and I hate it. It makes me not want to go back to it, other than the fact that my disk drive and my Xbox One blows balls. I mean, I guess also, too, another thing that needs to be touched on, too, is, and they've been improving it, so I guess I shouldn't bash on too much because they've been working on improving a little by little. I mean, like I said, they just added the Kate Bishop stuff, and they'll hopefully add, the other stuff they're still supposed to be, we'll see, at least Hawkeye and potentially Black Panther still coming out. And I hope they do come out. I hope they don't just give up on the game. I get, obviously, they've lost $60 million. But there's still a chance to potentially get that back. Maybe not even all of it. Even if it's half of it. That's still half of it you aren't going to get back if you just give up on it. The lack of a really good, in-depth endgame. Like I said, they've been working on building it little by little. But the fact that it wasn't there at the beginning of, the game's launch, it hurts it, okay? Every game like this that hasn't had a really in-depth endgame has suffered. It's why players don't want to play. You can do all AI guys when you do all these extra in-game missions, but the reason why you have a hard time connecting to anybody is because a lot of people don't want to play the game because the in-game sucks. Or at least it really did suck for a while. You got players starting to kind of come back a little bit now that there's more fresh content, but you can't launch a game. This is for anybody. This isn't just for Crystal Dynamics. This is for everybody who wants to do this type of game. You cannot launch it without a fucking in-game. Or at least without a solid endgame, and definitely plans to add to it immediately afterwards. Because you can't launch a game without an endgame. Or at least not without much of an endgame. It just doesn't work. Especially these types of games. You want people to grind for things, you have to give them more interesting things to do for the grinding. You gotta have a way to mask the grind. The grind is already gonna have people want to come back. But if you have at least mask it with something that's interesting or fun, then they're not going to hate themselves like they drank too much fucking tequila the night before, okay? So, it's just friendly advice. Also, you know, aside from the in-game content, the fact that there was really a lack of side game content also hurt the game too. I felt like, yes, the main story and the main missions were really good, but there wasn't really much. There was a little bit of side stuff here and there, but it was just so forgettable and so throwaway, and it sucked because the game really needed some interesting, really in-depth side quests. And most of the side stuff, I don't remember. I don't. It's only been a couple months. I don't fucking remember a damn thing. And a lot of that has got to do with the fact that, like I said, it was toss away at best. And that sucks because there are so many games that have shown that side games and side content, missions, character quests, stuff like that can be not only, fascinating, but can be really good. So hell, it can even be better than the main story itself because it gives you an opportunity to really sit down and go, what kind of story do I want to tell with this particular character? And have it focus on one character rather than a team. And, Mass Effect has shown how, obviously I know that's a different type of genre of game, but Mass Effect showed very much how that, how you can sit there and focus on one or two characters and tell this really unique, interesting story that can sometimes, like I said, trump, the main story because it makes it where you connect with characters on a deeper level. You're fighting, you're in the trench with these particular characters, flying all over the fucking galaxy doing these fucking crazy missions. Now, obviously, like I said, the Avengers, it's a small but smaller scale, but still, the point still stands. And so, it's not like games can't do it. They've obviously shown that they can. So I want more games to step up and do that kind of stuff because it's super important. And, and even then, you can use some of that side content, recycle it, in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, I wouldn't recycle the entire thing, especially if it's a fucking character-focused mission, but you can use certain areas and certain motivations to kind of fuel in-game, too. It's something that you can kind of tie in. The fact that it really hasn't been utilized more is kind of disheartening. So, let's just wrap this thing up. The final verdict for Avengers, after even the Kate Bishop stuff, this is post-Kate Bishop stuff, this is after they finally fixed a lot of the issues, is a 7 out of 10. Now, at launch, and within the first couple weeks, I'll say it was a 6 out of 10 at best. The story and the characters are the one thing that saved this game from being a 5 or less, honestly. Well, with the amount of bugs and the amount of glitches, the amount of issues that the game had at launch, it took a full month, or probably more, but it was at least a bare minimum a month for the game to get on track of being at least playable and decent. And by then, everybody stopped caring, right? And that's the thing is, first impressions are super important, not just with looter shooters, but any game, right? That's why Cyberpunk's taking as much heat as it is right now. For everybody out there. And I'm not just talking to the devs, because I know the devs get that. I know they understand it. But management seems to not have drilled that into their brain enough, and I'm hoping that maybe somebody up or top is hearing me right now and thinking about it before they launch their own game. We all would rather have you go ahead and push it back a couple months, and A, not overwork your devs, and B, give them plenty of time to try and smooth out the experience, because first impressions are everything. You'll make your money, but you have to put out a good product first. You can't just sully your goodwill for a game or two and think that people are going to just come fucking back and be willing to hand you over the fucking money. However, like I said before, between the characters, the story, and this new content they've been adding out, a lot of stuff has actually been pretty... the new content was actually fairly substantial, and they actually added quite a bit, which I was kind of surprised. It makes sense that they wound up pushing it back, because obviously, A, they didn't want to release it just as buggy as the main game, but B, there was a lot of stuff here. So, like I said, I'm excited to see what else they do in the future, but I also understand, too, that there might not be much coming out, because obviously they took a huge loss with this game. But there's still some things that are positive about it. There's still things that are worth checking out. And honestly, I know it was just on sale over the weekend. I think that sale just ended, but I think it was on sale for like $30. If you can pick up the Avengers for $30, I'd say go for it, honestly. Because like I said, even if you can't connect with other people, because there's not a lot of people that have been playing, I think there's been a little bit of a peak because of the new content dropping, but even if it's like a month or two down the line, and player base has kind of gone down again, you can play with AI companions and stuff like that, so you can still play this game single player, and for $30, I think it's worth your money. I do. I think it's still a fun ride. I still think there are still things that are good about it, that are memorable about it. It's just there's a lot of things that aren't memorable about it, right? And I like to see the devs and the team get a chance to fix that and improve that. However, I'd also like it if more teams would stop doing this process, because it's killing us. It's killing the devs, and it's also killing us, right? Because especially now more than ever, you're talking about 40 million people who are unemployed. You're talking about 30 million people looking at potentially being evicted from their homes in the next couple months. You can't afford to be shipping out games that are half-assed, half-baked, and buggy as fuck, okay? You need to make sure you're getting it right. And the more teams that do this, the more people take notice, right? And, and with other reports of, like, teams like the ones who created Hades, who, they've got more time off, they're not crunching, they're not doing things, but they're still putting out games that are potentially Game of the Year contenders in a lot of people's eyes. That's making people want to flock more to those types of games because, A, like I said, they're not as buggy, and B, the workers are getting treated right. Those are two big things. You're getting a polished, well-experienced game, as well as getting a game that didn't have to sit there and sacrifice a lot of people to get out and not even get out in a good state. So I hope that, like I said, more teams and more studios take note of that and start to change how they're doing things, because it's not working. Like I said, with the Avengers and and Cyberpunk 2077 coming out in these buggy experiences that they did, it's not acceptable anymore. And so it'll be interesting to see the progress the game makes, if it does continue to make its progress, and I hope it does. So anyways, that'll be it for me, guys. I appreciate you sticking with me. Like I said, I understand that, like I said, things have been crazy. This year has been crazy for everyone. It's been especially crazy for me. A lot of the stuff is late. Like I said, I was hoping to be caught up on this over a month ago. I was hoping to sit there and have everything done leading up to Cyberpunk, to where that was the last thing I needed to talk about before I do my Game of the Year stuff. And here we are. So I'll see you guys on the next On The Shelf. Bye, guys.
I waited for the night to fall in love. It's how you really know I fucked it up. That just a little lie is all it was. It's all it was. Didn't think for a minute. My intentions were so obvious. What the hell, I admit it. You're the first one of your kind, not just one in a million. So we turn the lights out, turn the lights out.